Hey guys, I finally found some time to edit an episode from almost a year ago, when I was invited to join a private podcast run by my friends, though they've graciously given permission for me to share this episode. It was only once I started listening to the audio that I realized I must have sat too close to their mic and the audio took a beating. I'm re-recording my own script, but I'll be clipping in all of Claire's reactions and our exchanges. All sources are going to be on backawayslowlypodcast.com. We're on pretty much every social there is, and don't forget to check out some other episodes and share the show with a friend. Without further ado, let's go visit the lamp. It's where the moths hang out.
That's Em.
That's Claire.
And you're listening to The Lamp. Welcome, everybody. Today is our first special crossover episode. Welcome, Em.
All right, let's do this.
I
hope you guys are ready.
Hope you're ready to learn some things. It's going to be a good time.
Erzébet Bathory. I thought that maybe I would take you guys through her history and whether or not the accusations against her were true. Maybe it was all a conspiracy, or maybe she was a vampire.
It'd kind of be cool if she was a vampire, not gonna lie. Just a brief warning. So Erzébet Bathory's story is going to be a little graphic, so if you are squeamish or upset by mentions of blood or gore or horrible things being done to people as accusations, maybe tune out and come back for the next episode. It's going to be a good time. There might be a test. Please take some notes. Learn a thing or two.
Yeah, it's a bloody time.
If you think you haven't heard of Erzébet Bathory, maybe you know her by the name Erzébet Bathory. Even if that doesn't ring a bell, you've definitely seen her referenced in pop culture, particularly in Hostel Part 2, Diablo 2, and some personal favorites of mine, the video game Resident Evil Village, Lady Dimitrescu is a reference to Erzébet, and the animated Hellboy film, Blood and Iron.
That I think way more people need to see.
I haven't seen that. I'll have to watch it.
Fantastic.
That sounds excellent.
Beautiful. And they have a second animated film, but I won't get into that because then that'll turn into a film review.
Seriously, go watch it. What most people think of Bathory for is that she was a noble in Hungary and she murdered young girls, particularly virgins, and bathed in their blood to pursue eternal youth. That's about as far as any average person looks into it, but obviously we're overachievers here. Something to keep in mind is that these events took place over 500 years ago. Other than that being a hell of a long time ago, there are other reasons that we'll chat about that make it really, really hard to be certain about the events that happened, as well as the personality of Bathory herself. There are some written records, and historians have taken a lot of time on this case, but this is my disclaimer that I can only use the sources on hand to give the story shape. But I find it fairly compelling and complicated. To start, I'll set the scene in 1500s Hungary. In 1514, peasants staged an uprising to free themselves from serfdom. Serfdom was a system of labor where peasants were forced to serve their local lords. The main difference from slavery is that the peasants weren't really owned property, though they were viewed as being tied to the land and the lord that owned that land.
You're kind of akin to livestock or buildings,
Yeah.
You're not really a person. You're not a slave, but not much better.
You're part of the farm. Like farm equipment, basically, in their eyes.
Actually, that's perfect.
It's kind of horrible, but that's kind of how I think of serfdom.
No, that's exactly what it is you are just kind of a means to an end. Yeah, farm equipment is the perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Essentially, this indentured servitude was how they were permitted to live in the area. They paid heavy taxes, struggling and laboring every day to get nowhere. Well, that rebellion didn't go so great.
Rebellions in that time period did not tend to go
Well, what resources did they have?
Exactly. They had sticks. And in most of that time, I don't know about Hungary, but a lot of time you weren't allowed to have a lot of weapons or hunting equipment.
But what came from it was a legal code called the Tripartitum in 1517. We'll get back to the Tripartitum later, but what you need to know right now is that it promoted the power of nobles, frequently viewing peasants and serfs as resources instead of people.
So that kind of farming equipment issue. It just pushed that even further as more punishment for them having rebelled.
In the world of royalty, the country had been split between Ferdinand and John. After years of fighting each other, in 1538, the two signed a secret treaty that stated when John died, whether he had a son or not, he would name Ferdinand as his heir and the true king of Hungary.
Ooh, that's a big deal.
And if you're going to do that, I don't know. I get why they kept it a secret, but also maybe don't make that a secret.
Yeah, because you can't uphold that if it's a secret. There's no way to prove that that's legit or real.
This way, John wouldn't have to keep using money and resources to fight Ferdinand, and Ferdinand would be king.
Sounds like a good deal for Ferdinand.
It really was kind of a good arrangement, but it would piss people off. I get why that it was a secret. It would piss a lot of people off.
Especially like his wife, who may have birthed him a son.
In 1540, John was blessed with a healthy baby boy, and John died 9 months later. Now, with what we know about people in power, what do you think happened?
But I'm assuming that nobody wanted to honor that treaty.
Well, how many people knew about the treaty?
2 people.
That's a real question. I think definitely their immediate courts probably did.
I would hope so. At least there's
somebody has to.
Know.
Well, later on in the story, it is actually relevant how many nobles witnessed something to make it legitimate.
I know we've discussed it at Ren Fair rehearsals. we try to go into the history of things. Like we talk about like
no, that's
we
good
have, like,
though.
Whole days of this. Like we have to put ourselves in the great chain of being for an afternoon. Like we create like the great chain of being with our characters. Queen Elizabeth's up at the top, and then like we have everyone like line up in a big line, snaking down to the trash collector. But no, we talked about great chain of being in a class, and I was like, I've stood in the great chain of being.
I've been in the great chain of being.
Yeah. But yeah, no, so I'm with you. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of like odd little protocols that are put into place with like.
It's smart though. You have to have witnesses. You guys can't just decide what to do.
Hell no.
Though at the same time, it doesn't seem to matter.
That's right. Transylvanian barons and John's wife immediately crowned the baby as king, treaty be damned. Spoiler alert for a handful of the Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon books. Now Hungary was divided into 3 parts. The north and west, Ferdinand's territory, became Royal Hungary. The central plains were held by the Ottomans, and the Principality of Transylvania was now John II's.
Ooh.
You don't have to remember all those names, but just know that the country has been split in multiple ways across multiple families.
But what does this all have to do with the Blood Countess? Well, this division also divided the loyalties of a very powerful family, the Bathorys. The Bathorys supported churches, schools, and other community programs, as well as the arts and education. The family's seat was in Transylvania, but the family also had a base of power in Royal Hungary. And in the midst of all of this, the most powerful families began to convert to branches of Protestantism.
Very big deal in that time period. Protestantism is a huge deal.
A lot of big changes within a few years' time. And it was into this mess that Erzébet was born. On August 7th, 1560, Erzébet Bathory was born to a pair of cousins, being the second child.
Not a huge deal at the time,
Just
but still cringed a little bit when I read that.
She had an older brother and would have 2 younger sisters. The family were Calvinists, a Protestant branch. A few of this branch's lovely beliefs included that humanity is sinful and corrupt at birth, and that God had already chosen who he would save. And if you weren't one of the chosen, that there's nothing you can do about it.
And you don't know who you were. You just have to like really, really hope that you were saved and that what you do is enough.
Well, and I decided to look into, so why would there be any motivation to actually be a good person or not, or actually do the right thing?
Exactly.
So I went looking into it, and it turns out that, especially if you're nobility, you proving to be a higher or better person kind of reflects that, oh, I am God's chosen.
Yeah, they were the opposite of fun at a party. It was like putting sour milk in the punch bowl at a party.
When America was founded, it's because all the people that everyone else in Europe hated came over here.
I know.
That's the kind of fun party that they were. So, yeah, this country was founded on the most...
like, boringest of the boring, the prudest of the prudes, the crankiest of the cranky.
let's take a look at what childhood in general would look like for a young noble. So I was kind of pleased to discover that apparently girls and boys were raised almost identically until they were around 10. Kids were encouraged to play outdoors and engage in games such as ball, to race, to go horseback riding, play cards or dice, and go ice skating with skates made of horses' rib bones. Peasant children, usually those of servants or nurses, were brought into the castle grounds to be playmates for royal children, offering socialization. At around 3 or 4, language education started with their local language, as well as Latin. Bathory herself also learned German. This source points out that reading was important for girls too, as she'd be quite a poor wife if she couldn't catalog food rations, order supplies, or write letters. And what kind of a mother would she be if she couldn't read the Bible to her kids and start instilling those good Christian morals?
And it's important that she's learning to speak Latin at this time, because at this time, I believe the Bible still wasn't being written in English.
And even then, I don't think it would necessarily be, snap of your fingers common.
No,
everywhere.
It was pushed back against heavily. We did not want people to be able to read the Bible and interpret it for themselves.
No, they wanted people to have to listen to what the pastor or the priest said.
You must go to church and listen to them.
You have to come to listen to it here, and that's the only way you're going to find salvation. Very manipulative, which is, hundreds of years of that.
Giacomo says, not until Daddy James gives us the English version. I hate James. That's the worst. Why did you make me say that out loud?
According to this thesis I read, families were able to recognize that children weren't just tiny adults, and they had their own needs and requirements for care. Archaeological digs found children buried between parents, along with toys, implying that even the poorest of households, that children were given love. Even when it came to nobility, the father was expected to take an active role. The father was in charge of escorting children to visit friends and family. If the kid got sick, it was expected that dad would drop everything to bring the child home. If anything happened to mom, it was dad's responsibility to take up the care of the kids immediately. Which sounds obvious to say, but in light of what we tend to hear about parenting in days gone by, I think it's important to mention.
And it's important to note that this thesis was written specifically about Hungary. Not entirely sure about other surrounding countries or their practices, but here, dad needed to be involved.
I love that.
When it came to emotional support, though, it wasn't exactly a priority. Children, particularly noble children, were made to further the family line and to strengthen political connections. If the child was on track with learning skills that would bring honor to the family, then maybe the parents would be emotionally available. So from what I read, they really did love their kids and cared about their upbringing, but emotional intelligence just wasn't the main priority.
No, there wasn't time for it. There was survival.
When it came to preferences of the child's gender, Rachel Bledsaw argues in her thesis that having a boy not only furthered the family line, but it was economically more beneficial as well. There was no debate of who inherited what if there was a male heir. The family also wasn't expected to pay for weddings for their male children. Quote, therefore, there was usually a sense of disappointment when a girl was born, even more so if the family had multiple daughters already. But the disappointment did not last long. Daughters were, in general, more doted on than their brothers, and in cases where a daughter died in childhood, were more frequently and elegantly mourned by their parents. Sons, therefore, were more profitable, but daughters were more loved. This is an interesting statement, and I'm curious as to her evidence for how the girls were more elegantly mourned.
I feel like that would be more elaborate funerals or more like, I think it would just mean more of like a feminine funeral versus a masculine funeral with like the general ideals.
Maybe the grief period was longer.
Probably, and I feel like there was more female involvement in a girl's funeral, would be my theory.
Yeah.
So like if like your daughter dies, your mother, your sisters, everyone's expected to mourn for a longer period of time and dress more elegantly for that than like a son's funeral where it's supposed to be like, I'm just applying traditional like our current ideas of gender to them, but that's how I would kind of
and that's going to depend on per country what their funerary starts. So it's all so involved.
When it came to Bathory herself, we don't exactly have a lot in regards to the specifics. While there are those who wrote about how she undoubtedly rode horses and participated in foot races, some would go even further, saying she was a tomboy, yet she also loved to dress up. But frankly, we don't really know. I had read that there were claims that records exist where Erzébet had frequent mood swings and fits of fury.
And that perhaps these wouldn't have been discouraged because that would be viewed as strong traits for leadership.
But that source didn't provide those supposed records, so I can't really vouch for that claim.
I have sources. I'm not going to tell you the sources,
me.
but I have sources.
But it's important to note that as a noble in such a turbulent time in Hungary, Erzébet would have been surrounded by power struggles, political scheming, and general cruelty that accompanied the desperation of the people involved. But this wouldn't have been hidden from her, far from it. These would have been used as examples in strategy. In 1570, the Bathory family approached the Naudeste family with a proposition. The Naudeste family had a 15-year-old son, Ferenc, who had already made a good impression at the Viennese court, and even came to have the title the Black Knight of Hungary. Of course, the Bathory family was offering their 10-year-old daughter up for marriage. To be fair, this offer wouldn't mean they'd be married right away, but that he'd be their preference of a match.
Yeah, and it was also, a lot of the marriages at the time were in name, not in practice. And if you were married, you were like, we signed a paper and this is like not appropriate for anything.
I really hope that's the case.
In a lot of cases, it was.
By 10 years old, Erzébet already had a reputation for intelligence, wit, capability, and beauty. The wedding didn't happen until Erzébet was the much more reasonable 14 years old, and Ferenc was 20.
That is gross.
Look, as impressive as this 10-year-old is, I don't know, you look at me like, you're ready to have kids.
Yeah.
Noblewomen had a good deal of power, even though that power often resided within gender norms. They had power, but they couldn't have too much power in comparison to men of similar standing. They lived in a constant juxtaposition of needing to be in charge, but also become submissive and subservient when required. But what was the child bride Bathory in charge of? This 14-year-old girl had to learn how to pay bills, keep track of credit with merchants, maintain rations of food, basic goods such as cloth and medical supplies. She had to organize the serfs in the fields and time them appropriately so that crops would grow and be harvested on time. She couldn't forget their defenses, as she had to order and pay for repairs to the castle and walls. She balanced accounts and sales of livestock, wine, and produce. That's enough to give me a panic attack on a good day, but she had to do all of this for 20 estates.
God.
20
No.
estates.
I have a hard time with my own, apartment.
Whether she failed or succeeded could mean the complete collapse
Of everything.
of huge spans of territory and hundreds of thousands of people.
Now, she didn't have to learn all of this on her own, as her new mother-in-law would step in to show her the ropes. That is, if her mother-in-law had been alive by the time she arrived. So yes, she did have to figure this all out solo. When it came to their marriage, Erzébet and Ferenc actually got along really well. The Ottomans launched an invasion to try to conquer Vienna, and Ferenc went off to fight. It was in this conflict that he earned the title the Black Bey of Hungary, at his reported delight in absolutely smoking the Turks. This didn't bode well for Hungary, though, as the population took a dive and famine became widespread, diseases flooding through the remaining people. While the 15 years of war were devastating Hungary, the Naudeste Bathory household was thriving. Bathory was sent loving gifts of treasure that Ferenc had looted from fallen Turks. In fact, things were going so well that the family was able to give a loan to the Habsburg family to ensure the soldiers would get their wages. But this would cause some tension, as Ferenc would frequently request the loan be repaid. Bathory would forward this request, and King Matthias I did not appreciate it. but just keep that in mind for later. All of this meant that Bathory's life up until 1591 had been pretty peaceful, despite that not being true for literally everyone else. But after 1591, she started to get a taste of the chaos that the rest of the country was experiencing, but the worst was yet to come. In December of 1603, Ferenz returned from his glorious battles terminally ill. We don't know with what specifically. January 4th, 1604, her husband passes away. Bathory was only 44. Before he died, Ferenz wrote to his friend, George Tourzeau, asking him to watch over his wife and children. For reasons we'll chat about later, this would clash with Tourzeau's duties as the Palatine of Hungary, which was the highest position within the Hungarian kingdom, second only to the king. But more on that later. Ferenz's death meant no more spoils of war, which meant less money. Bathory had to make ends meet with the less profitable crops and wines. 1 year later, in 1605, her brother died. Her brother didn't have any children, but a distant cousin managed to swoop in to take his inheritance. This meant that Bathory didn't have access to her family's fortune.
To be fair, they were kind of like, well, you've married into this other wealthy family.
This is our turn.
And she was so distant from the family, she could not physically get there to claim it.
No.
But let's go back to what castle life was like, and what life for the staff was like. Spoiler alert, it wasn't great. We need to talk about what was acceptable in terms of violence and punishment at the time. It sounds grim, but violence was honestly a way of life in early modern Europe, but there were very specific rules. So in public, a violent confrontation was acceptable, but it had to stay within genders. A dude can fight a dude, a chick can fight a chick, but on top of that, the people involved had to be within the same standing. I'm sure it surprises no one that a peasant striking a noble could mean that hand or their life. But in reverse, while it wouldn't cost the noble their life, it would look really, really bad to physically assault someone of lower standing in public.
It was frowned upon to fight someone who couldn't fight back.
These rules even extended on what weapons were permitted, as well as where a person could be struck.
Ooh, I didn't know that part. That's cool.
Guys could use blades, and they would target the head and vital organs. The loss of the head would mean a complete loss of honor. But when it comes to women, we don't have nearly as much evidence to go on, as these fights were underreported. I can only assume that it wasn't womanly to be aggressive. But with what we do know, a fight between women would start with talking shit, usually in a marketplace or common area. Usually that shit-talking involved accusations of promiscuity. Classic. Weapons were rarely used, and women more often slapped, clawed, or bit their opponents. Which, dear lord, I kind of view that as being more vicious than a blade.
Jesus, I don't know. The dudes might be able to go for the head, but God, I'm getting bit. Ugh.
Bites get infected too. Human bites are disgusting.
I've heard from staff at hospitals
that they'd brush their teeth.
They'd much rather come up with anything than a human bite.
Oh yeah, no, I'd rather take a stab wound than a bite from a person, especially someone who's like actually trying to hurt me. No,
no, they're actually trying to rip and tear. No.
Yeah, no. Ugh.
If they did use a physical weapon, it was a blunt bludgeoning weapon. Interestingly, they didn't go for a killing blow, but instead targeted areas associated with childbirth or beauty, such as the thighs, loins, hips, breasts, or face.
The insult of being hit in the boob with a blunt object because someone's mad at you.
Oh.
Like everywhere else, like I kind of get, but like being hit in the boob specifically just feels like an extra fuck you.
But shifting into the privacy of people's homes, violence was also expected. Nobles disciplined their servants, with the view that beatings were necessary, as servants were, quote, unfit specimens of humanity. However, because nobles were morally higher than their staff, the punishments they dealt needed to be appropriate, and it couldn't maim or kill the servant. Trust me when I say that what you're going to hear is not going to sound appropriate or fair. And poignantly, since it was improper to punish a servant publicly, there weren't necessarily a lot of witnesses to the punishments themselves. Also, horrifically, servants couldn't press charges against nobles. Predictably, this meant that nobles could potentially get away with wildly improper punishments, even within the context of the time, with next to no consequences. It turns out that punishment in the Nadaste Bathory household started as a family affair. Ferenz himself taught Bathory a neat little trick. He'd roll up a sheet of oiled paper, stick it between a sleeping servant's toes, and set it on fire. Ferenz never let the servants be harmed enough to die, but this will set the tone for the rest of this episode. Bathory, on the other hand, preferred black humor and karma-esque punishments. A steward named Disha testified later. He described how Lady Bathory was given 2 potato pogacha, which are a kind of biscuit. Bathory gave it to a servant girl to hold, but the girl ate one. When Bathory found out, she had the other biscuit heated as hot as possible, nearly on fire, and then shoved it into the girl's mouth.
Jesus.
Now, this is brutal and unacceptable to us, but in the context of the time, this was within the code of private violence. Though the punishment was harsh and painful, it wasn't lethal. I'm not saying that it was okay by any means, but it wasn't out of the norm for the time. Now, when it came to common crimes committed by women that would require punishment, single young women most commonly stole. It would be relatively easy to steal a jeweled brooch that could be sold for money. Just slip it into a petticoat, and it would be far quieter than trying to walk out of the room with a pocket full of jingling coins. Coins also weren't popular because currencies changed across borders, so pocketing an item to sell was simply more practical. But every now and then, servants did pocket coins. When they did, Bathory would have the coins heated and then pressed into the girl's hand, effectively branding her. It didn't kill or maim the servant per se, but she would always have a physical warning to future employers.
There was a clear mark that she was a thief and that she has in fact stolen before. She's labeled as a thief for the rest of her life.
At one point, Bathory found that a girl had stolen a pear. The punishment for that? She was stripped, tied to a tree in the courtyard, and covered in honey. She was left outside to be stung and bitten by insects. This particular incident happened while Ferenz was still alive. The girl was almost certainly brought inside before things went too far, so that she wouldn't die and break the social code of punishment. Another punishment that's frequently brought up is the ice bath. In the middle of winter, a girl was stripped and thrown outside. Buckets of water were poured over her until she froze to death. However, that wasn't really the intent. This punishment was done on the road when other forms of discipline weren't available.
Of course, that makes sense.
And the punishment was almost certainly done in response to the girl complaining of fatigue, cold, and thirst. All pretty valid. So this was meant to be another karmic punishment, but not meant to kill. But the fact is, it did. The steward Disha also recounted a shoemaker's daughter, Ilanka, being stripped, stabbed in her fingers and arms, flogged, and then made to hold a burning candle down to the base in her hands before ending her life. He also described when a seamstress was made to stand naked before Bathory as she beat them on the hands and nails until they became swollen and infected.
Oh, Jesus.
Bathory then forced the girl to sew, though of course not very well due to her condition.
Oh, because their fingers were broken.
Bathory loudly complained to the other attendants, quote, "What a useless, spoiled whore she is. She can't even sew." She then continued to stick the girl with a needle, whipping and flogging her. Now, these are noteworthy because of body parts that women of the time usually targeted during confrontation. Interestingly, this deviated from the public code of conflict. She didn't go after their faces, other areas of beauty, or parts involved with childbirth. She targeted the body parts associated with the girls' jobs. This was a very masculine perspective, physically attacking the root cause of their wrongdoing.
I wondered if this meant that since Bathory she had to uphold such a high standard of life from 14, this might have been misplaced anger of, why can't these girls get it together and do their job right?
That would make some sense there.
And, of course, centering a seamstress's punishment around needles fulfills her preference for karmic punishment. The girls coming into her employ were from peasantry, and they didn't exactly have a lot of other options. Legally, serfs could petition to leave one noble and serve another. In 1517, that right was removed, so they were forced to serve whoever they were stuck with. However, a noble was free to claim that a serf was a criminal and destroy their potential employment. Serfs also couldn't own land, which they had been able to do in the past. So, honestly, what choice did these families have? And after all, rumors were just rumors, right? So back to our timeline. In 1609, Bathory was running out of money. To deal with this, she decided to take in the daughters of lesser nobility and start a kind of finishing school, where they could learn manners and etiquette of the Viennese court. According to one source, within 3 weeks of sending their daughters there, every single student was dead.
Holy shit.
And no bodies were released to their families. This feels kind of crazy to me. Yeah, she could get away with the deaths of peasant girls, but killing all of your wards within 3 weeks? I'm extremely skeptical of that.
That's a big deal.
3 weeks?
Also, like, other nobles. These are noble children. These are, like, taught, loved. They've been to other nobilities' houses.
People know where they are.
Yeah, people know where they are. They know who they are. They know what's going on in their lives.
When she was questioned before about the deaths of her servants, she used the blanket excuse of disease, which was reasonably accepted for a long time. However, the local church refused to bury the dead unless they personally saw and examined the bodies.
Oh.
If this is true, then Bathory didn't like the idea of them seeing whatever she'd done, and the bodies were discarded in other ways. One writer named Kraft argues that, towards the end, her servants got sloppy, disposing of their coworkers. Bodies were found in grain stores, by roadsides, and even a dog dug one up and paraded around with a hand in its mouth. According to that source.
Traumatizing.
But when it came to these noble children, she had a much wilder story. Apparently one of the girls, after being caught stealing, had killed all of her peers before killing herself? But if that was true, why wouldn't Bathory just release the bodies of the girls to the church or their families? Either way, girls were dead. Girls of status. Girls that couldn't be ignored. While Bathory hadn't broken the law by killing her servants, accidentally or otherwise, the children of nobility, the tripartite saw this as murder. Matthias I started receiving complaint after complaint from noble families about the deaths of their daughters in Chete. Well, remember Turzo, the guy Bathory's husband wrote to before his own death, asking him to look after his family? Yeah, well, between March and July of 1610, he was appointed to investigate the rumors against the Countess. Talk about a rock in a hard place. Still, he dutifully started by visiting the villages around Chete. This was the start of what's called a common inquest. This was when the Palatine would gather evidence for a noble trial before a summons was sent. So Turzo started his investigation before a trial. Now, some historians claim that this is evidence of a conspiracy, since Bathory wasn't informed she was being investigated. But the purpose of a common inquest was just to establish if a crime had even taken place at all, and if a trial was even necessary.
Do we need to do anything about this, or is this just rumor?
Exactly.
Because there was no internet. This is all word of mouth or letter.
We're just hearing a lot of stuff, and at first it's all from peasants, and then, it slowly builds over time. And of course, to us, it's like, Jesus Christ, how much was enough? How many hundreds of whatever peasants?
It would have to be a lot, because there's no one's keeping track. It's not like now where we're like, shit, 5 people from this Wendy's have died. I don't know, it's the first place that came in my head.
The worst place that comes to mind. Not Carl's Jr.
It was the first place in my head. No. Like 5 of these workers have died under mysterious circumstances, and this manager has been very known to be violent.
So Torzo started looking, and what he found wasn't promising. In a common inquest, anyone could give evidence basically as long as they were old enough to have memories, if they were willing to take an oath of honesty, and if they were at liberty to give that testimony. That last point makes it kind of tricky for peasants to testify against nobles. But if both parties agreed to this, their testimony was given equal weight to a noble's testimony. During testimony, the witness had to say if they themselves were a witness or if they were reporting rumors of hearsay. Hearsay wasn't really supposed to be considered as evidence, but the tripartitum allowed it if the witness was clear that they were reporting rumors.
This was also the case in a lot of the witch trials, actually. The witness to the witch trials were like, yeah, I definitely saw her dancing naked with the devil. Totally saw that.
But more damning than rumors was a letter from a pastor at the Cete Chapel. He wrote that he found the bodies of 9 girls in the catacombs between Cete and his chapel. This was really serious, because now Bathory was facing accusations from the church. But after that letter was sent in, nothing was done. Torzo, nor any other official for that matter, ever went to confirm the bodies even existed. The best summary of the witness testimony when it came to Bathory's acts included the following. By the way, anyone squeamish can mute and come back in a minute or two. Girls were washed with and made to roll in nettles. Pins were stuck into their lips and under their fingernails. Needles were jammed into shoulders and arms. Girls chained and flogged on their breasts. Their hands, arms, and abdomens scorched with irons. Chunks of flesh were wrenched from their back with pliers, flesh cut out of their buttocks and between the shoulder blades. More body parts pierced with needles, mouths forced shut with clamps, knives, crushing injuries, fingers removed, lashings, and finally, a red-hot poker shoved into unmentionable areas. That last claim in particular was stated by Deschamps, but he specifically noted that he hadn't witnessed it, only heard about it. That punishment would fall back into the code of conduct, attacking a woman's source of childbirth, which we already know is unlike Bathory. That doesn't mean she didn't do it, but it leaves room to question. One writer adds that Bathory used an Iron Maiden for torture. Now, Iron Maidens did exist, one being discovered in an Italian basement in 1867, but it's frequently believed that these were more for show than actual torture. Also, none of the witness testimony even mentions it, so that claim is dubious at best. The stakes were high. If found guilty, Bathory could be beheaded, and her family could lose their status. This really put Torzo in a tough spot. He had to ensure that Bathory, being a noble, got a fair shake, as well as fulfilling the promise to her late husband. But he also had to fulfill his job as Palatine.
Yeah, you can't get around that.
Torzo took an unconventional route. He wrote to Bathory's son and sons-in-law to explain the situation as well as his findings. The family collectively gave Torzo permission to confine Bathory and take her accomplices to trial. Having secured approval from her family, Torzo decided to give Bathory one last chance. He and several others joined her to celebrate Christmas Eve at Cete. Bathory wasn't stupid. She knew why they were there. It was later revealed that she'd already written to her cousin, King Gabor Bathory in Poland, about potentially fleeing to his kingdom. As a sidebar, why her own family didn't help her escape isn't really known. Either they were worried that getting involved would bring punishment and disgrace upon the entire family, or they simply didn't know she was trying to leave. Anyways, some even say she may have been planning to poison Torzo and Matthias to protect herself.
What? That one sounds a little crazy to me, if I'm being honest.
They both became sick that night.
Oh shit, never mind.
But neither died.
She just poisoned in the halfway.
I don't know, but did anyone else get sick?
That's intriguing. But yeah, no, I don't.
Maybe they were sick from the way there. and it hit
Yeah.
later. I have no idea.
I'm intrigued by that.
Torzo questioned Bathory about the accusations over dinner.
Hey, how many girls have you shoved needles into?
Yeah, like, are you torturing people casually here, man?
She briefly replied that the deaths that occurred in her stead were due to diseases, but she grew angry when he persisted, storming from the banquet. Not a great look. It may have spoken to her privilege as a noble that she thought she could just leave the banquet, ignore the question of the second most powerful man in Hungary, and maybe all of these accusations would just vanish. Here's the thing. Bathory never went to trial. Torzo specifically set out to make sure she didn't go to trial, as this would embarrass the family and she may be killed. Torzo and the Bathory family came to an agreement that he could confine her without opposition as long as she didn't go to trial. One source argues that the fact she didn't have a trial in and of itself is evidence that she was guilty, that there was enough evidence to pose a threat. On December 29, 1610, Torzo and a squad of soldiers and Bathory's sons-in-law came to arrest the Countess. They met no resistance when they entered the castle and started their search. As many salacious books and documentaries report, they found a girl beaten to death in a hallway. When they reached the dungeons, 3 accomplices were cleaning up from the last session. They found one victim, barely alive. A source even says that they found Bathory still drenched in blood, caught red-handed, torturing a small child.
Damn. Very convenient.
Very convenient. And what?
How
No
helpful.
one decided to pass along that, hey, the Palatine of Hungary is at the gates?
Yeah. If she has accomplices who are helping her with this, they're not gonna be like, yo, girl, go wash your hands. Stop beating that kid. Like, come
I have this
on.
empty trunk over here. Hurry, we can get this done.
Like, let's get out of here.
In truth, the number of girls the party supposedly found varies greatly, from 2 dead girls to 80 to 437. That's quite a jump.
I don't think people understand how much space 437
I know, that's
bodies
this is
would
the
take
first
up.
thing I was thinking of is like, I know castles are big, but like, girl,
That is a
like
lot
floor
of
to
space.
ceiling?
Also,
like,
you would
Just
smell that when you walked in the gate. There's no hiding that.
Like,
If
why
I
would-
showed up and there was 437 dead girls, I'd be like, I'll face the consequences for this later. You gotta go, girl. This is insanity.
And here's the thing. Neither the pastor nor a member of the actual search party reported anything like this. I find it hard to believe that anyone would neglect to mention that when they stormed a noble woman's home, that they found over 400 bodies there, and a member of one of the most powerful families in the country still bathed in blood. There is
Yeah.
no way.
Not a chance.
Frankly, there's nothing that supports Torzo's report. Even if they had supported his statement, the court needed at least 7 nobles to witness this event to make it legally stick, which is surprisingly thorough. Another notably questionable influence was how Torzo questioned Bathory's accomplices, who were mostly staff. He asked them all 11 identical questions, not unlike how witchcraft trials functioned. As one source states, these questions made it clear what Torzo wanted to hear. All of them laid the blame at the feet of Anna Dorvula, a friend and companion of Bathory's who joined her court in 1601. This source didn't state if she was a member of staff or a lesser noble, but she was probably the latter. The Croat woman had a ton of rumors swirling about her. She was a witch who'd, according to the accomplices, supposedly taught Bathory how to beat and torture young girls, though she died of a stroke in 1609 before Bathory brought the girls in for finishing school. The conclusion was the same. In the end, all of the girls' deaths weren't truly the fault of Bathory, but Dorvula. The fate of these accomplices was far more gruesome than Bathory's. Ilana Jo, who was the wet nurse to all of Bathory's children and was heavily involved with the family for quite some time, was publicly executed via burning at the stake. That is, after her hands were cut off. Janos Fiziko was a teenager with the odd nickname the Dwarf, though I'm unsure if this was literal. He wasn't allowed inside the room of the deeds, but was viewed as an accomplice all the same. He was beheaded. Katalin Benetsky was responsible for disposing of the bodies and cleaning up after, so she was sentenced to life in prison. She was eventually released and disappeared soon after. Dorotua Saizentes was a longtime servant of Bathory and was specifically noted as being the cruelest of them all, particularly enjoying torture. She heavily laid the blame on Dorvula. She also had her hands chopped off and was burned at the stake.
Only way to kill women.
Well, I almost wonder if there was a weird fight between, like, well, we have to respect the propriety of women, but also how do we kill them?
So in response to rape, theft, and murder, execution and exile were options, usually in public so that the authorities could impress upon the public that there were real consequences to said crimes. However, another option was imprisonment. While this sounds really basic, the conditions of imprisonment were brutal. Cold, damp rooms, infested with all kinds of vermin, no contact with the outside world until death. While we think of towers as being the usual location, this wasn't popular until a century later. Until then, confinement was an option only to the wealthy, yet mentally ill, whose families therefore had the money to pay for their constant care and had a room available to keep them away from the public eye.
In Hungary, was the family expected to still pay for, like, your accommodations in prison? I know in other parts that it was expected that your family was to pay for your food, and if you wanted a blanket, your family had to pay for your blanket, and if you didn't have family pay for it, sucks.
The choice of confining Bathory in her home therefore labeled her insane, which would be how history would also remember her. Because although Bathory was originally intended to be sent to a convent, or
maybe
room,
don't send her to a place with a lot of young women.
Her son actually was like, hey, maybe we don't do that. But his reasoning was that it would clash religiously, and no other reasons.
She was confined to a room within her own castle. This choice benefited the family in the long run. By essentially labeling Bathory as insane, the family was able to recover socially because once a family member was handled this way, they were considered legally dead. Once that was done, her actions no longer reflected poorly on the family. Her husband's reputation as a Hungarian war hero was revived, and his side of the family also bounced back, Bathory's grandson marrying into the powerful Erzébet family. Quote, "From that point of view, the only person for which confinement was not the best solution was the Countess herself."
Wow.
August 21st, 1614. A guard finds Bathory's food tray untouched, so he enters. Countess Erzébet Bathory was lying in bed, her feet on a pillow, dead at the age of 54. Her cause of death is unknown, but the guard noted that the night before she'd complained of cold hands, which leads some to theorize her passing was from heart failure. She was buried at the Chete Chapel graveyard.
She was still buried in the graveyard at the church.
That is, until the villagers caused an uproar. After that, her body was moved to an unknown location.
Ooh,
We have no idea where.
a mystery.
Which I think was very much on purpose.
Yeah,
Well,
probably. Desecration's a big thing.
Now, how much can we trust these witnesses? Well, there were consequences to lying in a common inquest. The person would be stripped of their land and property, and they would also be stripped and banished. Okay, so that's some stakes. The crazy thing that we have to talk about, and absolutely cannot avoid, is that torture was practically a requirement in inquisitional cases, including on witnesses. So, the early modern belief system held that the truth wasn't given voluntarily, almost couldn't be given, without it being pulled from the body through pain. Yeah, it's crazy, but without torture, the truth could not be confirmed. So when a convicted criminal gave their testimony, it was all written down, but it wasn't considered a confession until after they'd been tortured, given a break for several hours, and then they'd read the confession back to the witness. If they confirmed it, only then would it be viewed as legitimate. Now, if they retracted their confession, they would be tortured again, since they were clearly hiding something if they'd lied in the first place. If they refused to speak or deny the charges, they'd be released. Yeah, just kidding. More
I was
torture.
gonna say, excuse me?
If they refused to confess after 3 sessions, only then were they released. But relax, guys. A session of torture only lasted up to 30 minutes. After that, they were given a day to rest, and then brought back in. The first session of torture was a tour of the instruments at hand.
So not that crazy, but it is very much like, so this is what the next day looks like for you.
Here you go.
Actually, this makes me curious is that why the Iron Maiden existed? Is this the first round of psychological torture? They didn't even use it. It was just the first round.
I would believe it. And a lot of torture initially, like the whole point was you weren't allowed to draw like blood. I don't know if that's still this time period. This time period, I think you're allowed to draw blood now. So messed up, but like pushing fingernails, totally fine.
The second session used devices such as thumb screws, but it always left the vital organ unharmed. The third stage, well, I'm sure you've all seen a torture chamber before. Isolation, starvation, sleep deprivation, or even watching someone else be tortured were all on the table. Even hallucinogens like nightshade were used. Witnesses weren't to be tortured, but that didn't save the plaintiff or defendant from torture. But because judicial torture was recognized as lawful, does that mean these witnesses were tortured? The tripartite was surprisingly quiet on this matter. It didn't strictly forbid it, but it didn't promote it either. And every single source I found heavily stated that at least some of these witnesses were tortured, probably very much because of the belief that the truth must be extracted through pain. So while these witnesses were clear about what they'd seen versus heard as rumor, I'm extremely skeptical that this was all information free of coercion, and I don't think it can be easily dismissed. Torzo himself compiled a transcript of the interrogations, which stated, quote, "The confessions of the defendants were given either voluntarily or after torture." So, torture definitely happened, but to whom or how much is unknown.
Did anyone die? I know that was a big no-no, that torture could not lead to death.
But like infection afterwards was fair game. You couldn't die on the table, but if you died of like an infection later,
That's your problem.
God said so. Sorry, guys.
One enormous thing to point out is that despite the evidence we heard from witnesses and accomplices giving the locations of where bodies were taken, no bodies were dug up to be verified, making all of this word-of-mouth testimony. This was a case of a potential serial killer, and there wasn't a single weapon or body brought forward. I don't really know what to do with that, because it's a lot of people, with a lot of rumors and statements, and a lot of punishments were conducted on staff, but with no real evidence. And in the present day, determining these victims is impossible. It's been over 400 years. And even if bodies had been found a while after the fact, the torture focused on soft tissue, which tended to decay first. And with no bodies having been sought out, despite accomplices knowing exactly where some of them were, there's no way to determine anything.
Do I think she was a cruel woman? Absolutely. Cruelty does not equal 400 bodies.
Servants definitely died on her
Oh,
watch.
100%. She was not good.
Well, we have a bunch of evidence that something happened, but why? The most popular theory is that Bathory was chasing down eternal youth. Funny thing, the first sign of this claim was in 1760, over 100 years later, by scholar Brother Laszlo, who discovered the hidden transcripts of the accomplice's trial.
Ooh.
This was likely fed by the already present fear of vampires in the area.
From that area specifically.
So he slipped that in.
And also providing an opportunity to cast the Hungarian noble as a diabolical and overly cruel creature, particularly because Bathory was a Protestant and Laszlo was Catholic. When he found those writings, the religious landscape was shifting, and he had an opportunity to write history.
That was a smart move on his part.
German scholar Michael Wagner would later use Laszlo's writings to repeat the bathing in blood allegation, going further as to claim that this was to please her husband. According to Wagner, when Bathory's maid had tried to fix her headdress, Bathory had boxed her ears so hard that blood gushed from the girl's nose. Some of it got onto Bathory, who noted how it made her skin appear paler, more beautiful.
If that was the case, wouldn't more people have done it?
Maybe they have. These records are not greatly kept about a
That's
noblewoman.
Okay, but like, just saying, we have a lot of very vain, high-up women. Queen Elizabeth I, around this time period, was not bathing in blood.
How many eyes were
As
on
far
her?
as we know.
Because right now she's a wealthy widow, kind of out in her estates. How many people were really watching her?
Elizabeth I or Bathory?
Bathory.
Bathory, yeah, no one's watching her. But like, if this was a thing that was working,
Oh, they'd find a way to do it.
people would have like
They'd find
been
a way to
doing
do
it.
it.
Like, there'd be documentation of it being done.
Oh,
and they found a way
absolutely.
to justify it and have it be God's plan and be like important and this is necessary.
Well, this is
and
one of the people that God would choose to save. And
Yeah, like,
shouldn't they
she
stay
must
alive?
have this.
According to Wagner, Bathory would bathe in the blood of young girls for an hour in the morning, that sometimes she would even bite and tear at her victims.
Just congeals around her.
Casually. Oh, God, I didn't think about
I'm
that.
sorry.
Oh, my God, my eyes watered in
I'm
a
so
heartbeat.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Anyway, 1604.
Jesus.
By 1604, this was apparently in an attempt to become beautiful enough to attract a new husband. But then Wagner really went off the rails when he brought the number of victims up to 600, where Laszlo had only claimed 50.
He just pulled 550 people out of his ass.
That's so many people.
What?
So many people.
From what I can tell, quite literally all of this was made up. People claim that this was all an effort of vanity, because, after all, Bathory spent hours on her appearance. But that was also true of literally every other noble. Beauty was a sign of health in their world, and so they had to look good all the time.
We put urine and lead on our faces at that time period.
I was cool for getting that.
They changed clothes frequently. They used perfume incessantly. Public baths, in particular, were believed to spread diseases. In all honesty, the records show a noblewoman about as interested in her appearance as any other noblewoman around her at the time. But one of the most popular contemporary theories, by far, is that she was a wealthy widow who posed a threat to the men around her.
She wasn't getting married. She now had all of the resources that her husband and her family combined. She had 20 estates by this point, maybe more. She posed a threat.
She had a lot of power and a lot of land.
Now, the enormous thesis that I used heavily states that because headstrong women were expected, her following that mold wasn't really a concern to the men in power. And according to the social structure of the time, noblewomen were viewed as nobles first and women second. So that author believes this theory is more of a Western concept being applied to a separate culture. And arguably, the far more reasonable action would have been for the king to have pressured her to remarry. Arresting and charging her might look like a good way to eliminate her, but it also cast shade on numerous wealthy families. However, I personally don't think that it would be entirely out of the realm of possibility. The Bathorys and the Nobility had been incredibly influential for a long time, and this may have been a way to keep that in check. As well, we shouldn't forget that Ferenc and Bathory had loaned money to the crown, and Ferenc kept requesting the loan be paid back. But it wasn't him that was passing on that unpleasant message. It was Bathory. This would neatly wrap up that debt. And while that source says that her being a woman didn't have much to do with anything, I don't think we can just throw that out. While there were examples of women in power and ruling at the time, they still weren't allowed access to equal rights and power. Their main purpose was still to get married, have kids, and feed everybody until the day she died, whether that was just for her kids or by running their estates. There's no arguing that noble women had much more influence in their society than the average woman. But remember, they were still expected to step aside and submit when a man of equal or higher standing walked in. Another theory is that this was all a reaction from stress. this heightened expectation to produce and care for a family was bumped up even further. Now she had to care for 20 estates worth of people. Perhaps the pressure of so much responsibility let her view this as a bending of the already very violent social rules. Kimberly Craft in particular theorized that Bathory was lashing out at those closest to her, that being her servants, due to an undiagnosed anxiety disorder. Now, anxiety and depression weren't at all unknown at the time, but if this escalated to what they called frenzy, one of the only solutions would be to physically lock away the person for social safety, which Bathory was. As an extremely anxious girly, it's never occurred to me to beat the people around me because I was stressed.
But then again, we're not nobles, who had a crazy amount of power over the people around you, who were taught
fair.
that the people around you were a means to an end for your standing.
That's fair.
And in a world where it was acceptable for you to do quite a bit to whoever was in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's also been a suggestion or two that the pressure from a tyrannical mother-in-law had pushed her to require a vicious release. But if you remember, Ursula Nadeste was dead by the time she arrived at 14 years old, so that theory's off the table.
They never would have met then, really, would they? Maybe once or twice.
Maybe
but
once to kind of evaluate the kid, but frequently they would send someone else.
It was
to
usually an
evaluate.
ambassador or somebody else, or just a painting sent across. It's like,
No, at the time, is this 10-year-old hot enough for your son?
jeez, I hate that.
I know, it's so awful.
Throw it away.
Ancient Tinder, instead of snail mail.
But one of the most interesting theories I've seen involves epilepsy, or more popularly known at the time as falling sickness. Fortunately, by this point, it was generally understood by the elite that epilepsy had natural causes, even if they didn't know what those causes were. However, these fits of epilepsy could be alarming, so the sufferers would frequently be ushered out to have their fits in private. How do you treat an epileptic during the early modern period? Why, you take the blood of someone who isn't an epileptic and smear it on the lips of the epileptic as their fit ends.
Oh, I didn't know that one.
Or you mix the blood with a piece of the non-epileptic skull and give it to the epileptic at the end of their fit.
You make a
Yeah.
smoothie out of a dead person's skull.
That actually tracks because like treats like.
Oh, I mean, of course it tracks,
like, also-
but it's fucking insane.
We ate mummies.
I did not. I no.
I say we.
I did not. That's why we don't have a ton of them.
I know,
We don't have a ton of mummies because the Victorians fucking snorted, ate whatever the fuck.
It's argued that it's unlikely we would have found evidence of her epilepsy in family records, as the family would have done everything they could to have hidden this condition, for fear it would damage her marriage prospects. This offers some interesting speculation about why she may have killed. Since blood was the most frequent treatment, perhaps it wasn't vanity, but a desperate attempt to cure a worsening illness. Naturally, this doesn't make murder okay, but it's a fascinating theory.
Frequently, things are a combination.
Yeah.
Anxiety disorder, epilepsy, the pressure of running this kingdom, the acceptable violence code. You have this condition that is potentially worsening over time. It is out of your control. You are the figurehead of
Very
this family
scary,
in the
like-
location. I can see this snowballing and the justification of it to try to essentially save yourself
Yeah.
from this condition. I think that it's a lot more possible than quite a few of the other theories.
Yeah.
One of them I didn't include, she was just a vampire.
Yeah. She just has
That's
some-
where the theory begins and ends. I don't even have a paragraph about a
Delicious.
vampire. Moving on.
In conclusion, it isn't a question of if Bathory did anything, but how much. A few enormous things to take into account is that we only have word-of-mouth evidence, almost certainly given under torture, suspicious written reports, some being written over a century afterwards, and no physical evidence. She absolutely punished girls, and some almost certainly died due to these punishments. Whether she meant to, I have no idea. As to why, I really don't know if we'll ever know why, considering how long ago these events took place, as well as the steps nobility took to hide this embarrassing blemish on the nobility. Either way, I'm uncomfortable saying that nothing happened and she was totally innocent. The fact they never found any bodies or even looked for them is really suspicious, but girls were definitely missing, definitely died, and I won't ignore that.
This has been delightful. I've been very much enjoying getting to listen to your research and your writing of how you portrayed this.
With that, I leave you for today. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode, and thanks again to Claire and Jock for letting me pop in to rant about ancient serial killers. All links are in the description, and don't forget to tune back in next time.